Welcome back to the channel. Buckle up, because what we're witnessing isn't just about semiconductors or trade, it's the slow unraveling of America's global economic grip, and the beginning of a counteroffensive led by BRICS, by China, and by nations tired of being bullied into submission. Something has changed. You can feel it. The skepticism, the frustration, the quiet rebellion building behind the scenes. It's no longer just whispers. The world is starting to say no to Washington. And today, we're diving into two massive events that prove it. This is the new global resistance. Let's start with the man at the center of this global storm, Donald Trump. Once again, he's dusted off his favorite tool, the art of the tariff. He's slapping sanctions, threatening allies, twisting arms, and calling it economic strategy. But this time, it's not working like it used to. Because now, the world sees the playbook. Trump's latest maneuver? Pivoting from bans to sales. You heard that right. After years of trying to block chips from reaching China, the US has all but admitted defeat. The so-called chip diffusion ban has collapsed. No matter how many rules Washington writes, chips keep finding their way into China. So now, the game has changed. Instead of blocking chips, the US wants to sell them, a lot of them, to China. Why? Because the future isn't just about short-term profits, it's about controlling the future of artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics. And here's the thing, China is uniquely positioned to dominate this future. As Nvidia's own CEO Jensen Huang explained, China has cutting-edge AI capability. They are world-class in mechanical and electrical engineering, mechatronics, and they have an enormous unmatched manufacturing base. That combination? It's rocket fuel for robotics, and the US knows it. If China pairs its scale with superior AI and chips, it doesn't just become competitive, it becomes unstoppable. So what's the US strategy now? To slow China down just enough, to maintain that tiny edge in chip technology, and above all to stop companies like Huawei from flooding the world with competitive, affordable tech. David Sachs, a key Trump tech advisor, put it plainly, "We're not selling the best chips to China, but we can still prevent Huawei from scaling up and taking over global markets." That's the plan. Deprive China of its own market, starve its domestic champions of oxygen. But here's the kicker. It's not working. Beijing isn't falling for it. They've summoned Nvidia to discuss security risks in their H20 chips. Why? Because they fear backdoors, trackers, surveillance tools, any American fingerprint embedded in the tech that might compromise national security. And let's be honest, who can blame them? China knows it's one thing to buy American oil. It's another thing entirely to let foreign chips run your power grid, your EVs, your military, your entire tech infrastructure. And while this is happening, Chinese state media is amplifying those security concerns. They're sending a message, no more blind trust, not in this climate. Now here's the real story most Western outlets won't tell you. China isn't just protecting itself, it's building its own future, aggressively. It's nurturing domestic chipmakers like SMIC. It's giving Huawei the room to test its 910D chip, one that's aiming to outperform Nvidia's H100, especially in power efficiency. And in a world obsessed with energy costs and thermal output, that's a game changer. Less power, lower cost, global appeal. This is a serious threat to US tech dominance. Once China achieves parity in chips, it won't just stop there. It will make them cheaper and flood the global market. And that, my friends, is what Washington fears the most. Let's widen the lens. It's not just China in the crosshairs. It's the entire BRICS bloc. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and more countries on the waiting list. These nations are looking at America and saying, enough. By 2032, semiconductor demand in BRICS economies is projected to reach $210 billion. That's a massive, booming market, one that China is rapidly positioning itself to dominate, one that the US cannot afford to lose, especially as tariff wars make American chips more expensive and less attractive. Now let's talk about Taiwan, the heart of global chip production. Trump's new tariffs could add 20% to chips made in Taiwan and sold in the US. That's huge. Even the CEO of AMD has warned, chips from TSMC's Arizona plant could cost up to 20% more. So much for reshoring. It sounds great in press conferences, but in practice, it makes US tech less competitive and raises prices for everyone. Consumers, developers, manufacturers. Unless America has complete global dominance, these tariffs are just shooting itself in the foot. And while the US struggles with inflation and interest rates, China is scaling fast. Look at solar energy. In just 5 years, China has tripled its solar output. It's cutting dependence on Western fuels, It's mastering the clean energy game, it's exporting to the world. Now apply that same playbook to chips, and you can see what's coming. China knows it can't rely on US tech forever, and it's not planning to. Buying Nvidia chips today may buy them time, but Beijing is not walking into a trap. Let's pivot to BRICS defiance, and the next chapter in Trump's tariff war. Recently, the US slapped a stunning 25% tariff on Indian goods, nearly as high as the one imposed on China. Why? Because India continues to import Russian oil. In response, US officials issued an open threat: stop buying Russian energy, or face even harsher penalties. India's response? Silence. But silence with defiance. Because behind the scenes, officials are doubling down on Russian crude. Why? Because it saves India billions, money desperately needed as global economic pressures mount. And the US can't punish everyone. That's the paradox. Meanwhile, China is also on Washington's blacklist. If it continues buying Russian oil, Trump has warned, it could face a 100% tariff. Yes, you heard that right, a full trade blockade in all but name. But here's the catch: you cannot bully a rising superpower into submission, especially not one whose entire strategy is built on self-reliance. The US is beginning to realize that its old tools, tariffs, sanctions, pressure, no longer work. Not when nations have alternatives. Not when global trade can reroute around Washington. And here's the darkest twist in the story. The US economy itself is cracking under the weight of its own trade war. Just days ago, job data was revised down by nearly 250,000. It was a gut punch to Wall Street. The stock market plunged nearly 3%. Trump was furious, threatening to fire the Commissioner of Labor Statistics. At the same time, he's publicly attacking Fed Chair Jerome Powell for not cutting interest rates. But what did he expect? Tariffs raise prices, consumers spend less, businesses slow down, hiring freezes, layoffs begin. It's textbook economics, and the textbook is now bleeding red ink. Now here's where it gets really dangerous. The US is on track to borrow $1 trillion in a single quarter just to keep the lights on. That's not sustainable. And foreign investors? They're watching. They're hesitant. Because lending money to the US now feels like funding an economic war, one that might boomerang on them. Even Treasury auctions are showing the strain. The government is cutting back on long-term bond issuance. Why? Because they can't afford higher interest rates. They're shifting to short-term borrowing, a sign of desperation. Final thoughts. Who blinks first? So where does this all go? We're watching a global game of chicken. Trump is escalating the trade war, hoping to cripple China and dominate BRICS. But every move reveals more cracks in America's economy, its strategy, and its global credibility. Will Beijing cave? Unlikely. Will India stop buying cheap oil? Definitely not. Will BRICS abandon bilateral trade in favor of the US dollar? That ship has sailed. And the biggest question of all, will global markets stop lending to the US? If that happens, this entire house of cards could come crashing down. Let me know what you think in the comments. Will China really fall for the Nvidia bait? Will BRICS hold the line against Trump's economic siege? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth behind the headlines. We're just getting started. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and stay safe.